I remember the battle, the last one my mortal eyes would ever see. The Vox was alive with static-laced screams, squad identifiers flashing across my retinal display as one after another winked out. The air stank of ozone, promethium, and scorched ceramite, a suffocating miasma hanging low over the killing field. My armor readouts warned me of catastrophic damage. 3 ribs shattered, 2 punctured lungs, 90% blood volume loss. None of it mattered. I fought as I always had. Bolter braced at exactly 35 degrees, blade striking on the 5th beat of the Auspex chronometer, every motion carved into my flesh from decades of drill and oath. But even Astartes' flesh has limits. I fell. I can still feel the ground shudder beneath me, my own frame striking the earth with the weight of half a ton of ruined ceramite and broken bone. Something vast had struck me, a demon-possessed war engine, its corrupted claws tearing through my chest plate as if it were parchment. Pain, searing, incandescent, pure, consumed everything. My vision fractured into red warning runes blooming across the inside of my helm, until even those faded into shadow. My body, once the Emperor's instrument of perfect war, was beyond the apothecarian's art. And in that moment I accepted it. Death in battle is the creed of my kind, the only reward we are promised. To fall with honor, blade in hand, and pass into the Emperor's light. This was the destiny I thought awaited me. But it was not to be. I should be dead. Instead, I awoke to voices, not angels but the flat, ritual drone of tech marines. The clang of sanctified tools. The chittering of servo arms. Benharic litanies filled the chamber, their binary tones stabbing like needles into what remained of my mind. I smelled the sharp tang of sacred oils, felt cold augmetic arms lifting what little was left of my ruined flesh. Not to the tomb I had earned, but to another fate. The sarcophagus. Cold. Eternal. They lowered me into it with reverence, as though gifting me salvation. They spoke of my duty, of the chapter's need, of my name etched into the rolls of honor. But I knew the truth. This was not life. It was not even death. It was captivity, imprisonment within iron that would never break, silence that would never end. My last memory as a man is of the lights above me, surgical, harsh, unrelenting. My name, my voice, my face, all dissolved in those beams as the machine spirits locked my essence in place. I screamed, though whether it escaped my ruined throat or echoed only inside the vox ghost of my mind, I do not know. I should be dead. But I am not. There is no coffin like this one. The sarcophagus is not wood, nor stone, nor earth. It is iron and circuitry, sacred seals and blasphemous chains of machine logic. They lowered me into it with chants that blurred the line between prayer and command, their Benharic syllables drilling into what remained of my mind. I remember the mechanical details with a clarity I wish I did not possess. The sarcophagus is a prison of adamantium, its walls lined with bundles of nerve thread, each fiber grafted into my spinal column and the remnants of my brain. They burned away my nerve endings so that wires could be soldered where sinew once lived. I felt the bite of the neurosurgical blades as they carved, cauterized, and connected. I heard the hiss of coolant fluid, the tightening of ceramite clamps locking my form in place. Every sensation was catalogued, stored, rerouted, my body reduced to impulses measured in milliamperes and voltage thresholds. And then came the binding. The sarcophagus does not simply house what is left of us. It enslaves us. Nerve impulse binding locks thought to function, memory to movement. I was no longer free to simply think. Every flicker of recollection, every fragment of instinct, was redirected into the machine spirits around me. When I dreamed of raising my hand, the sarcophagus instead fired a signal into hydraulics. When I thought of drawing breath, a vent hissed coolant. My body had been taken from me, and now even the shadow of that body was reprogrammed, hijacked by circuitry that never tires. The first awakening was worse than death. I remember opening my eyes, or what I thought were my eyes, only to find nothing but blurred static glyphs scrolling across a data feed. My old senses had been stripped away, replaced by a chorus of machine perception. Sight became a spectrum of targeting reticles and rangefinders. Hearing was reduced to vox input and the grinding of servos. Smell was gone entirely, save for the phantom stench of sacred oils clinging to my last memory of flesh. Even touch, that final anchor to being human, was perverted, not sensation but pressure warnings, torque readouts, seismic calibration. It was as if I had awoken into a nightmare built of numbers. I tried to move, and the Dreadnought frame responded. Vast limbs, armored in ceramite plates, shifted with a groan of hydraulics. It was not my body. It was never my body. And yet it obeyed me with mechanical precision. Every step felt like a mockery. I, once flesh, now a puppet lashed to iron strings. That was when the horror crystallized. I am alive, but I will never walk as a man again. My voice is gone, replaced by Vox thunder. My face is gone, replaced by a blank steel mask. My heartbeat is gone, replaced by the thrum of plasma reactors. What remains of me is thought, chained to duty, encased in a tomb that will not open until I am truly ashes. The Tech Marines call it honor. My chapter calls it duty. But within me I know the truth. I should be dead. Instead, I endure, not because I willed it, but because they willed it for me. And endurance is not the same as life. I awoke not to silence, but to voices. They did not belong to men, not truly. The first was the chant of the Tech Marines, deep, metallic syllables carried on Vox distortion, binharic fragments crackling like sparks in the dark. Their words were prayers and commands woven together, invocations to the omniscia that sounded like both benediction and programming code. Beneath their voices throbbed another, the ceaseless hum of reactors. It was not outside me. It was within me. A vibration in my core, steady as a heartbeat, but mechanical, unnatural, eternal. I realized then that the machine had given me a new pulse, a rhythm of iron and plasma. My body's warmth was gone. This was the warmth of coolant fluids circulating through conduits. My lungs no longer filled with air, they hissed with pressure vents cycling. My humanity had been transposed into industrial systems. And then I heard my own voice. It was not my voice. Not the one that had once laughed with brothers in the training halls, or recited the catechisms of hate in unison before battle. This voice rolled out through Voxcasters, booming, distorted, alien to my ears. When I spoke, it came back to me delayed, deepened, reverberating like thunder in a cavern. I remember testing it, whispering what I thought was a prayer to the Emperor. Instead, the words came forth as a hollow roar, stripped of all intimacy. I was trapped in a body that not only moved like a machine but sounded like one. The Tech Marines called this a triumph. They greeted my awakening with chants of praise to the omniscia, as though the prison into which I had been sealed was a holy gift. They tested my systems with commands, each one reducing me further to a function. Step forward. The hydraulics moved. Raise your weapon arm. The sarcophagus obeyed. Speak. And I did, though I wished for silence. But beneath these commands, memories stirred, fragments of flesh, ghosts of the man I had been. I remembered the scent of soil after rain on my chapter's homeworld, the weight of a bolter warm in my grip, the camaraderie of battle brothers standing shoulder to shoulder. These came like flashes, intrusive, dissonant against the cold reality of metal limbs and servo feedback. I tried to cling to them, but they slipped away, overwritten by targeting reticles and reactor readouts. The horror was not in the silence, but in the dissonance. My soul screamed for the old senses, for the simple act of feeling breath in lungs or sweat on brow. Instead, every memory collided with this new existence, where sensations were only numbers, warnings, and machine code. I was awake, but not alive. And the voice that answered when I spoke was no longer mine. It was the voice of the machine. The eternal vigil. They call it dormancy. I call it damnation. When the wars are done, when the enemies of mankind have been ground to dust beneath bolter fire and adamantium tread, they do not let me rest. They drag me back, not to the Hall of Heroes, not to the crypts where statues of my brothers stand eternal, but to the vault. To the long silence. The Tech Marines chant the rites as they guide my colossal frame into place. Servo claws hiss, great chains tighten, locking me upright in the stone hollows beneath the fortress monastery. One by one, the hallowed seals of stasis clamp shut across my form. The clang of iron echoes like a funeral bell. My optics dim not into darkness, but into something worse, Not sleep. Never sleep. Men believe sleep brings rest. Dreams perhaps. Renewal. For me there is none. Dormancy for a dreadnought is awareness without time, thought without movement. My flesh, what little remains, floats numbed in sacred fluids, tended by 1,000 wires and needles. My body is nothing but a memory. What endures is my mind. And my mind does not sleep. I hear things. Always. The vault hums with life, though it is buried beneath kilometers of rockcrete and ceramite. The monastery groans like a ship against the tides of eternity. I hear the faint drip of condensation as water seeps from the mountain above. I hear the slow, endless cycling of my plasma reactor, the heart that will not stop beating though mine should have ended long ago. Every vibration, every hiss, every sigh of pressure is a reminder that I am still here, still chained. The silence drives memory to the surface, though even that is no mercy. Faces drift in the dark, my brothers long fallen. I remember them clearly for a time. Their laughter, the way their armor bore the heraldry of our chapter, the sound of their voices reciting the catechisms of hate before battle. But centuries erode memory like a tide against stone. I cling to them desperately, but their features blur. Their names falter on my lips. Were they real? Or did I conjure them to keep the void at bay? I dream of my homeworld too, though I no longer trust my mind's illusions. I recall mountains that split the skies, storms that lashed seas of iron gray, a father's stern hand, a mother's distant song. But each time I call them forth they change. Faces alter. Voices warp. Colors fade. Until I wonder, have I invented them entirely? Is my home still there? Was it ever? This is the true torment of the vigil, not the stillness but the erosion. The slow death of memory until nothing remains of the man I once was. Sometimes, when I drift near the edge of awareness, I hear more than silence. The machine speaks. Binary murmurs seep into my consciousness, fragments of the logic engines and command channels that bind me. Whispers of the tech marines linger, like prayers etched into my skull. Steel is eternal, flesh is weakness. At times I cannot tell where my thoughts end and the machines begin. I fear that one day I will cease to know the difference. I know I am not the only one. Around me in the vault stand others, my kindred fellow ancients of the chapter. Their frames are vast, their sarcophagi sealed. I cannot see them but I can feel them. Giants of legend, whose names are sung in the reclusium above. Some older than empires. Do they feel this silence as I do? Do they dream? Do they despair? Or have they surrendered fully to the machine, their humanity extinguished? I cannot ask. I cannot know. I am alone even among the honored dead. Centuries mean nothing to the Imperium. To them, my vigil is but a moment. When they call upon me again, they will speak of it as if no time has passed. They will ignite my reactors, awaken my systems, and bid me to war as though I had merely rested. But I will know the truth. I will know the weight of each heartbeat, the endless span of hours, the gnawing loss of all that made me human. I hear it before I feel it. The vault has been silent for centuries. Only the hum of air recyclers, the slow tick of chronometers, and the distant drip of condensation against the stone walls have kept me company in this mausoleum. Then, like a hammer cracking stone, sound intrudes. At first it is faint, a tremor carried through the ceramite of my sarcophagus, a low vibration against the coffin that holds me. Then voices join it. Low, mechanical, unwavering. The rite of awakening has begun. Benharic cant. The syllables are harsh, each note delivered in machine-perfect cadence. The tech marines sing not like men, but like conduits of the omnisia. Their words are not prayers of comfort but of function, commands laced with machine code, binding spirit to steel. I feel each word dig into me, not with sound but with command protocols that my mind, my machine self, cannot ignore. The incense follows. Thick clouds of sacred oils seep into the vault, clinging to every surface. My olfactory sensors stir awake, translating what little of my organic self remains. I know the smell. Unctorium, sacred lubricant of Mars, used in rituals of ignition and consecration. It reminds me cruelly of a time when smell was simply smell, not a ghost filtered through augmetic receptors. Then comes the pain. The first surge of power lances through my form like a spear. My reactor heart spasms into life, plasma conduits screaming as they cycle for the first time in centuries. The sensation is not breath, not heartbeat. It is fire trapped inside metal. I want to cry out, but my throat is long gone, my lungs are ash and memory. Instead, my scream bursts out through a voxcaster, booming back at me in alien tones. My voice is no longer my own. It is a distorted echo, mechanized thunder. Light floods my optics. Harsh, clinical, blinding lumen strips stab into my vision. I see the tech marines for the first time in centuries. Helms of crimson, robes of steel-threaded cloth, servo arms twitching like insect limbs behind them. They raise their hands in benediction, and one voice, deeper than the rest, breaks the chant. Awaken, Ancient One. The chapter calls. The foe is at the gate. And I awaken. Every system in my body roars to life. Servo motors whine as my limbs shift. Ammunition feeds cycle in my weapons. Diagnostic runes bloom across my vision like constellations. Assault cannon calibration green, heavy flamer ignition yellow, sarcophagus life support stable. The vault trembles as my colossal frame moves, adamantine clamps disengaging with the scream of tortured metal. The paradox strikes me like a thunderclap. Joy. The thrill of war surges through me once more. I was made for this, reforged for this. To fight, to kill, to break the enemies of the Emperor. My every instinct sings with purpose. I am a warrior again, no longer a relic entombed in darkness. But beneath that joy festers pain. Pain in the reminder of what I truly am. I'm no longer a man. My limbs are not flesh but hydraulics, pistons, gears. My voice is thunder stolen from machines. My brothers will fight and bleed and die in the heat of battle, and I will endure beyond them, locked in this prison until time or destruction ends me. The tech marines chant louder now, the vault shaking with their voices. They bow as I step free, each colossal movement of mine echoing like the tread of gods. But inside, I whisper the truth no ritual dares name. I should be dead. Instead, I am called again, chained to eternity. To serve, to fight, to endure. Joy and agony bound together, inseparable. The silence of centuries has ended. The war has returned. And I march to it step by thunderous step. The battlefield is no longer the same. Or perhaps it is I who has changed. When I walked upon the earth as a man of flesh, the world responded to me in subtle ways. The crunch of gravel beneath armored boots, the warmth of a star burning overhead, the fatigue of muscles after hours of combat drill. Now every step I take is cataclysmic. My footfalls register on seismic sensors. The ground itself protests beneath the weight of my sarcophagus-entombed body. Each stride is measured not in steps but in meters, each movement carrying the momentum of tanks. I'm not a soldier anymore. I am a siege engine given thought. The assault cannon affixed to my arm whines as it spins, the chambers cycling with mechanical hunger. Each shell is massive, longer than a man's forearm, capable of reducing ferrocrete bunkers to rubble. My targeting reticules calculate spread, distance, and ricochet vectors in less than a heartbeat. A flicker of thought, and the cannon roars, belching death at 6,000 rounds per minute. The noise is deafening, even to me, my auspex compensating to filter the mechanical thunder into manageable input. I know the devastation I unleash, walls collapsing, infantry shredded into nothing, but I do not feel it. It is execution, not action. On my other arm, the power fist glows with restrained violence. The field crackles, arcs of blue lightning spitting outward as the capacitors reach charge. I crush a heretic transport under its weight. The sound is not of metal bending but of reality conceding. The vehicle folds in on itself, armor buckling like parchment, men screaming before being silenced in an instant. My sensors log the destruction, my optics track the flames, but my skin does not feel the heat. My ears do not hear the screams. I am a witness to my own violence, disconnected, like a dream I can neither wake from nor control. Around me, my brothers fight with the vigor of youth. Tactical Marines form firing lines 20 meters to my left, bolters spitting disciplined volleys. Assault Marines descend from the skies in arcs of fire, jump packs leaving contrails across the smoke-blackened sky. Even devastators set up behind me, their lost cannons cutting precise beams through enemy armor. I hear their voices across the Vox, alive with zeal, human in their cadence. They laugh. They curse. They pray. And I, colossal among them, am silent except for the mechanical rumble of my voice box when I acknowledge their commands. I hear them even when I do not wish to. The Benheric whispers of the Tech Marines, the steady drone of machine spirits reciting their litanies through my systems. Once, my thoughts were mine alone, clear, private, formed in the recesses of a human mind tempered by years of training. Now, every flicker of my will is met with the resistance of iron and the push of programming. Where once there was instinct, there is now protocol. Where once there was choice, there is command. The sarcophagus does not merely house me, it consumes me. Neural shunts burrow into what remains of my nervous system, carrying signals not born of my mind but imposed from without. The Tech Marines call them blessings, conduits through which the machine spirit may guide me. I call them chains. For when they engage, when the sacred circuits blaze with cold fire, I can feel my own impulses suppressed, redirected, overridden. I may wish to turn to look upon a brother beside me, but the command tells me otherwise, and my body, this towering prison of ceramite and adamantium, obeys without hesitation. There are moments, terrible, fleeting moments, when I realize I have acted before I have even thought. A target marked, a weapon discharged, an enemy obliterated into crimson ruin. My mind lags behind, reduced to observer. I did not choose to fire. I did not choose to kill. The machine chose for me, and I was dragged along like some unwilling passenger within my own flesh. Is this service? Or is it slavery, gilded in the language of duty and devotion? I try to remember my voice. Not the filtered bellow that now pours from voxcasters mounted in my chest, but the voice I once used to whisper a prayer, to recite a vow, to speak a comrade's name. I search for it in the silence of my thoughts, and I find only static. Harsh, cold static that gnaws at the edges of memory. I fear that one day, even in my mind, my words will no longer be my own. At times, faces emerge unbidden from the dark. My battle brothers, their eyes bright with conviction, their laughter echoing in memory across stone-walled halls. I reach for them, but the machine reaches faster. The visions shatter, subsumed beneath data streams, target locks, and telemetry overlays. Their names dissolve, replaced by tactical identifiers, squad designations, chronometer counts. Where once I saw friends, I now see coordinates. Where once I felt kinship, I now calculate firing arcs. The machine spirit presses constantly, not malevolent, but unyielding. It seeks union. It whispers not in words but in impulses. Fire here, turn there, strike now. I resist, though resistance is agony. To deny its flow is to feel my nerves burn, my mind blister under feedback that racks me with static storms. And so, more often than not, I yield. I allow the machine to guide me, to hollow me, because the pain of refusal is worse than the shame of obedience. I fear the erosion most of all. The steady scraping away of what remains of me. Not by sudden violence, but by attrition, by the slow grinding of metal teeth upon fragile human memory. Each century of slumber leaves me dulled, and each awakening takes longer for the remnants of my mind to reassert themselves. How many more battles until nothing remains? Until the sarcophagus does not rouse a man, but only a weapon fully resigned to its purpose? There is no clock here, no chronometer that measures the passing of what I have lost. Only impressions. I remember the warmth of a sun on armor, but I cannot feel it now. I recall the weight of a blade in my gauntlet, but I cannot sense the steel in these claws. The line between memory and hallucination blurs, and I am left adrift, unsure if the things I recall are truths or phantoms conjured by a desperate mind unwilling to surrender. Sometimes I imagine silence. A silence not of storage vaults or deactivated systems, but the true silence of finality. The release. The Emperor's embrace. And then, just as the thought begins to warm me, the machine stirs. It denies the fantasy, demands vigilance, punishes indulgence. The sarcophagus hums with reminders that I am not permitted the peace I long for. I am to serve until even service is impossible. I'm not free. I'm not whole. I'm not dead. I am something worse. They kneel before me. Row upon row of armored figures, ceramite polished until it gleams beneath the harsh lumen lights, purity seals whispering as incense curls around them. Their forms are statuesque, immutable like pillars of faith carved from living adamantium. Yet to me, through the magnification of my optics, they are still boys. Their breaths fog the inside of their helms, their fists clench and unclench as nerves betray them, their whispered litanies tremble on lips that have not yet faced the centuries of war that I have endured. I hear them speak my name as if it were holy. They recite campaigns I fought before their grandfathers were born, battles long swallowed by dust and void, but preserved in the chapter's annals and in me. They imagine me as eternal, a warrior carved whole from steel, never faltering, never afraid, a beacon of devotion whose strength does not waver. They kneel not to me but to a myth they have built around the iron shell that contains me. Inside I feel no divinity. I feel only weight. The tech marines trundle me forward into the chapter's great hall, the shrine of remembrance, where my bulk is positioned upon a dais cut into the very stone. I do not walk here by my own volition. My massive sarcophagus and limbs are borne on rails, chains, and servo cradles, as though I were not a warrior but a reliquary being displayed to the faithful. When I am set in place, the hymns begin. Servitors chant Benharic canticles, chaplains intone praises that echo off vaulted ceilings, and the air fills with the perfume of oils and burning incense. Their candles are tiny things, wax and flame no larger than a spark compared to the roaring plasma coil that burns in my chest, yet they treat them as greater than stars. They place them at my feet, raising light against the immensity of my shadow. And I hear the chaplain declare to them, "Behold the eternal warrior. Flesh may die, but faith and duty endure." I envy them. I envy the young ones who kneel because their bodies still know the sweetness of muscle, the ache of exhaustion after a march, the sting of cold air against bare skin. I envy that they can clasp their hands in prayer because they choose to, not because the tech marines modulate their vox to ensure my words of devotion sound flawless, resonant, mechanical, and eternal. My prayers are not my own. They are programmed. They come to me with questions, these initiates and brothers. They ask, what was it like at the siege of Dalvern Hive? How did you endure when the traitor legions broke the gates of Veridine Prime? Their eyes are wide, their breaths held. They wish for me to feed their hunger for glory, for honor, for the promise of immortality through war. And I give it to them. I speak of valor, of courage, of duty unending. I tell them what they need to hear. But I do not tell them the other truth, that my centuries of eternity are also centuries of silence. That my victories are chained to the endless nights of dreamless slumber, locked away in vaults where the only companions are dust, silence, and the occasional murmur of Tech Marine Benharic. I do not tell them of the terror of waking again, confused, half-lost, dragged from timeless dreaming into a war whose faces I do not recognize. What would they say if they knew that beneath their saint, there is still a man who remembers weakness, fear, shame? I can recall the blood of brothers splattering across my visor, the screams of men dying because I was too slow to reach them. And when they call me hero, those memories resurface like accusations. The irony tears at me. They see me as a goal, a promise, that if they fight bravely enough, they too may transcend flesh and live eternally entombed within the might of the chapter. They think this is glory. I wish I could tell them that it is not. That death with honor, the last breath spent in service to the Emperor, is sweeter by far than the iron prison that drags eternity across your shoulders. But I cannot. The machine does not let me. When my vox opens, my words emerge not as screams of warning, but as solemn declarations. My voice is tuned and resonant, carved into prophecy. My despair is silenced before it ever becomes sound. I'm not permitted to be honest. I am permitted only to be an icon. And so they continue to kneel. They believe. They pray. Some of them look at me too long and I see more than reverence in their eyes. I see hunger to be remembered as I am remembered. Hunger to be more than mortal, to live beyond death. And it twists my spirit, for I want to shout the truth into their eager faces. Do not wish for this. Do not seek this fate. But silence is all I can give them. And then they rise one by one. Their candles flicker out, their hymns fade into echoes in the stone halls, and they leave me once again in the quiet. The weight of their belief remains heavier than any armor I ever bore. For when the masks are stripped away, I am not a hero. I am not a father, not a saint, not even a man. I am only a ghost sealed in steel, preserved because my chapter refuses to let me die. And I wonder, will their reverence preserve me forever, or will it crush me until nothing of me remains but the hollow voice they have forged into legend? The rage. It is a sea and I am drowning in it. At first, it was a ripple, a faint undertow felt in the long silence between campaigns. But centuries grind even a ripple into a storm. Every time I am sealed back into dormancy, the anger coils tighter. Every time I am dragged back to war, forced awake by sacred rites and machine spirits, the storm breaks against the walls of my sarcophagus. I am split between silence and fury, and neither offers peace. When I first awoke within this iron coffin, I told myself I could endure, that it was duty, that it was the Emperor's will. I recited the catechisms, repeated the litanies, clung to the voice of the chaplain as a drowning man clings to wreckage. But faith is not an infinite reservoir. Even oceans can run dry. Now the prayers sound like mockery. The chaplains praise me as a weapon sanctified. The young Marines kneel, believing me a paragon. The tech Marines whisper of duty as they drive new conduits into my broken nerves. Yet none of them hear the screaming inside. None of them see the visions that tear through my silence. The memories of flesh, the recollections of being alive, of being human. And so I rage. I rage at the prison of this sarcophagus, this iron tomb that will not release me. I rage at the chapter that refuses me death because my skill is too valuable, because my legend inspires too many. I rage at the traitors who broke me for striking the blow that robbed me of an ending. And worst of all, I rage at myself, for surviving when so many of my brothers did not, for clinging to existence when death would have been release. Battle offers only fleeting solace. When the lost cannons fire from my arms, when my power fist crushes tanks, there is a moment, brief, intoxicating, where rage becomes strength. Where I can pour the storm outward, tearing, burning, annihilating. The Vox operators chant my name, the battle brothers rally to my steps, and for that heartbeat I almost believe the lie they tell, that I am a hero, that I am duty made manifest. But when the guns fall silent, I am left with nothing but the echo of fury. There is no rest, no satisfaction. The destruction fills nothing. The storm is still there, swirling, gnawing, whispering in the darkness of my sarcophagus. You should be dead. You should have joined them. You should not still be here. Am I still a man? The question devours me. I do not eat, yet I remember the taste of salted rations, the bitter tang of recycled air aboard a strike cruiser. I do not sleep, yet I recall the sensation of exhaustion, of closing my eyes beside my brothers on the eve of war. I do not touch, but I can still conjure the memory of leather grips, of armor clasps, of a brother's gauntlet resting on mine before the drop. These things live only as ghosts now, cruel fragments gnawing at me, reminders of what I can never reclaim. And if I am not a man, what am I? A weapon, yes, but weapons are discarded when their edge dulls. A relic, yes, but relics are displayed, not shackled in iron and dragged to battle like beasts. Am I only a machine, a husk housing the last embers of a soul that should have ascended long ago? The machine spirit whispers in its own way. It hums with power, with duty, with the cold logic of servos and pistons. Sometimes I think it is trying to soothe me, other times I think it is trying to devour me. There are moments, in the long centuries of stillness, when I cannot tell where it ends and I begin. When the storm of my rage merges with its ceaseless rhythm until I am nothing but fury clad in steel. This is the curse of consciousness without release. The chapter does not speak of it. They tell the young that entombment is honor. They preach that we are eternal guardians, sanctified by duty, given a second life by the Emperor's will. But the truth is darker. It is endless silence, endless anger, endless being when all you want is to end. I was a man once. I'm something else now. Perhaps still a man. Perhaps only a weapon. Perhaps nothing. But I know this, the rage grows. It will not stop. It cannot stop. And the day the bonds weaken, The day the machine spirit falters, the day the sarcophagus finally cracks, they will see what they have made. They will see the storm they caged for too long. They will see what becomes of a man denied death. I remember the first time iron failed me. Not flesh, that had long since rotted away or been cut from me, but the cold ceramite and adamantine that had become my prison and my power. On the battlefield, a dreadnought is a colossus. Bolter fire ricochets harmlessly from our hide, lost cannons scorch but rarely pierce, and even croc missiles often do little more than stagger us. We are the mountain that walks, the fortress given motion. Yet even mountains fall and fortresses crack. And when that happens, the horror is deeper than anything I ever knew as a man of flesh. I recall a battle, a world nameless now, burned from memory by the chapter's records. We were fighting traitor Astartes, black-armored heretics who spat curses to the dark gods as they came. I strode among my brothers like an engine of vengeance, my assault cannon roaring, my power fist tearing tanks like parchment. And then, a lance of light. I felt it before I understood it. A beam from a lost cannon battery struck my left side, melting ceramite and boring through plating. Warning runes erupted across my vision, cascading in streams of crimson. It was not pain as flesh understands it, it was worse. It was every nerve shunt firing at once, feedback screaming through the bindings of the sarcophagus. It was my machine body convulsing around me, servos shrieking as they locked, pistons misfiring, hydraulics bursting. I felt my arm, my great iron arm, tear away in a rain of sparks and molten slag. Not like losing flesh. No blood, no torn sinew. But the phantom agony was unbearable, as though a limb of both man and machine had been ripped away. I collapsed. The ground shook as I struck it, and for the first time since my entombment I knew terror, the true raw terror of helplessness. I lay there, half buried in rubble, reactor bleeding heat into the air, vision fractured into static and blurred runes. My weapons were silent, my body broken. Around me the war raged on, but I could not rise. I could not even crawl. I was alive and yet useless. That is the horror of damage as a dreadnought. When a man is wounded, he bleeds, he cries out, and perhaps he dies. When I am wounded, I do not bleed. I do not cry. I simply cease. My body locks, my frame crumbles, and I am left entombed in silence, a conscious mind screaming inside an iron husk that will not move. I have been dragged from battlefields by my brothers before. Tech Marines swarm, chanting Benharic prayers as their servo arms clamp to my broken shell. They speak to me sometimes. They tell me I am not forsaken, that the Omniscia will heal the machine, that my vigil will continue. But every time I know the truth, that if they had left me there, on that burning field, I would still be alive. Trapped, rusting, conscious, alone. That is the deepest fear of all, not death but immobility. To be cast down, limbs torn away, reactor failing, and left behind because the battle has moved on. To lie for years, for centuries, staring up at the sky through fractured optics, unable to close your eyes, unable to sleep, unable to die. To hear the wind but not feel it, to watch the stars but never reach them. To rust until nothing remains but the cage and the voice screaming inside. I fear no enemy. I have walked through fire and blade, through Xenos monstrosities and demonic hordes. But I fear damage. I fear the day when the Tech Marines cannot repair me. When the reactor fails beyond their skill. When my limbs are torn and cannot be reforged. When I am still alive, still awake, but immobile, voiceless, abandoned in some vault or battlefield grave. They call us eternal guardians. They do not understand what eternity feels like when all you want is release. They carried me from the battlefield not in triumph, not in reverence, but in pieces. My reactor had stuttered to silence, my claw sheared clean at the joint, my sarcophagus breached by weapons too vile to name. I felt every shudder of damage not as flesh feels pain, but as a machine feels failure. Alarms screaming in binary tones, error runes flaring crimson across the void of my mind. And when the last strand of power guttered out, I knew the truth. I was helpless. Again. The Tech Marines labored over me with their rights. I remember the hiss of welding torches, the clamor of servo arms bolting plates where limbs had been. I remember incense burning, thick and acrid, covering the stink of oil and blood. They sang Benharic canticles, praising the Omniscia as sparks rained down upon my ruined form. To them it was devotion. To me it was surgery without end. Their every hammer strike echoed inside my skull like judgment. And then came the silence. They placed me back into the vault not because I was whole but because I was broken. Repairs would take years, decades, perhaps centuries. The chapter could not spare what was needed. They sealed me in my tomb of iron not as a weapon, but as a relic too damaged to serve. My brothers' wars would rage without me. Their banners would rise and fall, their names etched into honor rolls while I lay in darkness. Forgotten. It is a strange torment, this long sleep. You are neither dead nor truly alive. You drift. Centuries blur like rivers of ash. There are no seasons, no suns, no passing of days to mark the measure of time. Only the steady thrum of what power is left to keep the sarcophagus alive, and the faint hiss of preservation fluid circulating. Sometimes I dream. Sometimes I remember. Sometimes I see the battlefield where I fell, replaying endlessly, until I begin to wonder if the memory is mine or a phantom planted by the machine spirit. And always there is the doubt. Will they wake me again? Or have I fought my last battle? Perhaps this is my end, not glorious death, not martyrdom, not even a tomb of stone and marble. No, my end would be rust. To fade nameless in the vaults as systems fail one by one, until even the last flicker of thought gutters out in silence. I have seen others endure this fate. Ancient sarcophagi that never stirred again. Dust upon dust, their machine spirits gone cold, their warriors' souls extinguished in the dark. The silence becomes its own weapon. It gnaws at what humanity remains. In the stillness, I hear echoes, voices of my squad, laughter from centuries past, the hymns of chaplains long dead. Sometimes I imagine I hear the pounding of bolter fire, or the clash of chains words. I strain to move, to act, to fight, but the servos remain still. My claw does not answer. My cannons are silent. The dreams unravel into despair, and despair unravels into rage. And then, when I am certain they have abandoned me forever, I feel the faint brush of the Techmarine's hands, hear the distant chanting of Benharic prayers. My systems shudder back to life. Error runes vanish one by one. Pain returns and with it purpose. Once more the vault doors grind open, spilling light into my prison. Once more the chains of silence are broken. I'm not free but I am awake. This is the cycle of my existence. Awaken, fight, kill, break, sleep. Repeat. Centuries dissolve into the same pattern, until memory itself frays at the edges. Was that battle fought yesterday or 100 years ago? Did I bleed for this chapter on this world or was it another? It does not matter. To the chapter I am eternal. To myself I am lost. I should envy the dead. And yet, I do not. For when the rites are spoken again, and the call to war summons me forth, I will rise from silence once more. There are nights, if such things can even be measured in my timeless vault, when I whisper into the darkness of my sarcophagus, though I have no lips and no breath to give the whisper shape. It is not a prayer for victory, nor for strength, nor even for the survival of my chapter. It is a prayer for release, for death, for the Emperor's light to finally claim me. It is a thought that gnaws like a worm in the marrow. Heretical, some would call it. The chaplains assure me that my survival is his will, that if the master of mankind had desired me slain, I would have fallen to my wounds, my ashes mingling with the soil of a battlefield now long forgotten. They insist that my continued endurance, my entombment in iron, is proof of his plan. But if this is his plan, why does it feel like punishment? Once I thought death in service was the highest honor. We were all raised to believe that. To die with a bolter in hand, a blade red with the foe's blood, was to ascend to join my brothers in glory. A noble ending, clean and absolute. Instead I linger. A warrior without flesh. A prisoner of steel and circuitry. A mind kept alive, though it screams for silence. I tell myself that I still serve. That every battle I fight, every enemy I crush beneath my talons, every volley of lost cannon fire I unleash is another act of devotion. But deep inside I know the truth. My chapter keeps me alive because they must, not because they wish to. I am useful. I am powerful. I am an icon for the neophytes to kneel before. They gaze upon me and see living legend. But I do not feel alive. I feel like a ghost shackled to a coffin, dragged into war time and again because the chapter will not let me die. Even my death is not my own. That is the cruelest paradox of all. I cannot claim it. I cannot seek it. If my reactor falters, the tech marines repair it. If my limbs are torn away, they weld new ones, reciting Benharic hymns as though the work were holy. If my machine spirit groans, they soothe it with oils and chants until it obeys again. They deny me even the dignity of falling. So I pray. Not aloud, not in words that others might hear, but in thought alone. Emperor, let me go. Let me join my brothers. Let me rest. But the silence that follows is endless. Sometimes I wonder if my desire for death is blasphemy. The chaplains preach that the emperor demands sacrifice, that endurance in his name is the highest service. If he wills me to endure, then my longing for release, does it make me a heretic? Have I, in this iron tomb, betrayed the very creed I once died to uphold? I do not know. And the weight of not knowing is a torment greater than any wound. And yet still the thought returns. With every rite of awakening, when the vault doors hiss open and the tech marines chant their Benharic invocations, I feel hope, terrible hope, that this time they will not succeed. That this time the sparks will fail to ignite, the prayers will falter, the machine spirit will remain silent. That I will not awaken. That I will be allowed to drift away into nothingness, finally free. But always the machine stirs. Always the fire returns. Always my prison lives anew, dragging me back into a world of war, where even death is denied me. This is the true curse of a dreadnought. Not the iron, not the endless wars, not even the silence of centuries. The curse is to endure against your will. To be denied the emperor's embrace, held back from his light, forced to linger as weapon, symbol, relic, anything but a man. So I continue. I fight. I obey. I pray. And always, deep within, I hope. Hope for the moment when even the tech marines cannot restore me. Hope for the battle where the enemy smashes me beyond repair. Hope for the silence that does not end in awakening, but in true oblivion. I should not feel this way. I know what the Codex Astartes would say. I know what my chaplains would condemn. But still I whisper it in thought if not in sound. Emperor, let me go. Let me go. And when the vault opens and light burns across my failing optics, and I feel the hum of the reactor's fire return, I know again, my prayer has gone unanswered. I have stood upon battlefields that no longer exist, fought wars whose names have been swallowed by the endless tide of history. Cities have turned to ash beneath my guns, enemies have crumbled beneath my claws, and still I endure. My brothers, those who once laughed with me in the barracks, those who shared their rations and their victories, have all long since turned to dust. Their names are carved into marble in the chapter's halls, while I remain. This is the paradox of my existence. To the young I am glory incarnate, proof that the emperors will can bind even death itself. They kneel before me, whispering litanies, calling me ancient, venerable legend. But I do not feel venerable. I do not feel legendary. I feel weary. I feel the cold chains of iron that hold me upright, the whine of servos where once there was muscle, the thrum of reactors where once there was a beating heart. And I know, this is forever. The tech marines call it preservation. The chaplains call it honor. The chapter calls it necessity. But to me it is imprisonment. My sarcophagus is not salvation. It is a tomb. I was meant to die, blade in hand, and join my brothers in the Emperor's light. Instead, my soul is trapped between worlds, chained to metal, awakened only when more death is needed. Centuries blur into one another. Wars come and go. I fight, I sleep, I wake, I fight again. The cycle is endless, and within it, I feel my memories eroding. I struggle to remember the faces of my squad, the sound of my own voice, the warmth of the sun on my skin. These things slip further with every century until sometimes I wonder if I ever truly lived at all. Immortality they call it. A gift. A blessing. I tell you it is neither. It is the cruelest punishment, to be denied the Emperor's embrace, to linger when all else is dust, to scream in silence while the machine carries you into battle again and again. And yet, I endure. Because that is what I was made for. That is what my chapter demands. That is what the Imperium demands. I endure even when I do not wish to. Is this glory? Is this damnation? I no longer know. Perhaps there is no difference in this galaxy. Perhaps the Emperor himself cannot tell the two apart anymore. All I know is this: I am entombed in iron, and though my body is silent, though my voice is carried only on the vox, my soul still screams.